starting a three-part series on the book of Job. Won't be consecutively because I don't preach every week, but we'll start today and then we'll finish it up next month in May when I preach again. But Job answers one of the toughest questions raised by skeptics, by Christians, by just humanity in general. And it's really, why do bad things happen to good people? And that's kind of the question that's on a lot of people's minds. Lee Strobel, you may know him, he wrote the book Case for Christ and Case for Creator and different things like that. He came out with a recent survey, national survey. They polled people and they said, what if you could ask God one thing, one question, what would it be? And the answer that the most people said was, why does bad things happen to good people? And I think that's telling in our culture. You know, we're okay when bad things happen to bad people. You know, when you even see it when we watch movies. You know, if you watch a movie and there's a guy that's, you know, awful and killing people and stuff, we want to see him in the movie. If he gets away with it, we're like, oh, that's an awful movie. You know, this is the worst movie I ever saw. The bad guy got away with it. But if something bad happens to a good person, we immediately think, man, this movie better get better fast. This person better find solace or comfort at the end, or get everything back or something. Or, you know, this is an awful movie, worst movie we ever saw. And so it's kind of already preset into our mind that, you know, good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. And then that's why when good things happen to bad people, we get frustrated a little bit. But then also when bad things happen to good people, we kind of question and what's going on here. So turn to the book of Job, chapter 1. And we're going to be looking at chapters 1 and 2 today. And we'll kind of summarize a little bit as we go through. But I have to turn there as well. To the book of Job. Job is an interesting book in that a lot of times you'll hear from Job chapter 1, Job loses it all, and then immediately people skip to Job chapter 42. Job gets it all back and it's doubled, and we don't really understand what the process is of the rest of the book. So we're going to be kind of looking at that. We'll look in Job chapter 1, verse 1, and we will read down to verse 5 to start out with. It says, in the land of Job, or land of Uz, land of Job, in the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. Or, like if you were me and Awanas, his name was Job. For like half my life, I always thought it was the book of Job, so I don't know, maybe other people do as well. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys, and a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the East. His sons used to take turns holding feasts in their homes, and they would invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When a period of feasting had run its course, Job would send and have them purified. Early in the morning he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. This was Job's regular custom. So the first thing we see about Job was that Job was a righteous man. We see in the passage here that he was a spiritual man, that he was a leader of his family spiritually. Later in the text, as we get to it, God will call Job a upright and blameless man. So we know he was a righteous God. He led his family spiritually. We don't know a lot about Job personally. We're not really sure when the book of Job actually took place. Most people will say that it happened during the patriarchal period, so he's kind of a contemporary of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, back in that period. And he's not a Jewish person. He is from the land of Uz, which is in northern Saudi Arabia. So he's kind of down in the desert a little bit. and it says that he is a very prosperous person. Look what he has. He has 7,000 sheep. He has 3,000 camels, 500 oxen, and 500 donkeys. Now, they don't have money back in the ancient world. You based your wealth on how much stuff did you have. And he's got a lot of stuff. He's very prosperous. Says he's one of the main men of the East. So he's a very powerful, wealthy, influential guy that loves God and follows after him. So next we see here the scene shifts, and this will be very important as we look through Job, is that we see this scene up in heaven between God and Satan, but Job doesn't. Nobody around Job sees what's going on. His wife, his family, his friends, nobody knows what's going on up in heaven. So that'll play a big role in the thing. Look in verse 6. It says, "One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, 'Where have you come from?' Satan answered the Lord, 'From roaming through the earth and going back and forth in it.' Then the Lord said to Satan, 'How do you consider my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil.' 'Does Job fear God for nothing?' Satan replied. 'Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face.' And the Lord said to Satan, 'Very well, then everything he has is in your hands, but on the man himself do not lay a finger.' Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord." So we see here that there's this cosmic conversation, if you will, between God and Satan. Satan comes to God, and God says, "Hey, Satan, what you been doing? What have you been doing down there on the earth?" And Satan kind of says, "Well, I've been walking around looking at all this stuff." And so God says, "Hey, have you seen Job recently? He's this great, blameless, faithful, upright guy. He's down there. Have you seen him?" And he's probably just thinking, "Yeah, I'm sure you've seen him. You probably hate this guy because he's against you." And so Satan goes, "Yeah, I saw him. He's an okay guy, but guess what? He's only believing in you because he's got the perfect life. He's got health. He's got prosperity. He's got a great family. You've given him everything that he could ever hope for. And that's the only reason why he believes in you. Because everything's going great for him. And it's easy for, even as Christians today, if everything's going great, we love God." And that's kind of how Satan's feeling. He's saying, "Look, he only loves you because everything's going right. If you took it away, he would hate you. He would curse you to your face." And so we kind of see a different response maybe than what we would think. We would think that God would say, "No, he wouldn't do that," kind of end of story. But Satan and God kind of have this, I kind of do this little dance here for the next, in chapters 1 and 2, where they're kind of going back and forth. And so God says, "Really, Satan, you think that if you just took everything away from Job, that he would leave me?" And he's like, yeah. The only reason he's doing it is because he's rich and powerful and wealthy and all these things. So God says, "All right, Satan, I take your bet, kind of. You can take anything away from him, but you can't touch him. And we'll see who's right in the end." And I always think this is ironic because God is omniscient and all-powerful and all-knowing. And so he already knows what's going to happen in the end. And he's kind of setting Satan up here a little bit. But Satan goes off and thinks, "All right, I've got this. I'm going to ruin Job's life. He's going to turn on God. And I'm going to show God that people don't follow him because they love him. People only follow him because he gives them a lot of stuff." So point 2 is bad things happen to righteous people because Satan is on the attack. Now look what happens here with Job. He has pretty much the worst day in the history of the world. Look in verse 13. "One day, when Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, 'The oxen were plowing, and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabeans attacked and carried them off. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the fire of God fell from the sky and burned up the sheep and the servants, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties and swept down on your camels and carried them off. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, yet another messenger came and said, your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. So we see 4 messengers, and this is like back to back to back to back, because it says like as soon as the next messenger gets done speaking, the next one's lined up. So Job, in a span of probably 20 minutes or so, his whole life gets ruined. We see here the couple points. First guy shows up and says, Job, I got some bad news. Some Sabians came up. The Sabians were from southern Saudi Arabia. I tried to say that 5 times fast. Southern Saudi Arabia. So down Yemen-ish, what we would consider now. So they came up and they stole all your livestock. They stole all your stuff. And they killed a lot of your servants. And so Job's probably thinking, that's, it's kind of bad. He's lost some money. He's lost some servants. But by itself, not a huge deal. Then another guy comes up. And he says, Job, I got some bad news for you. He's probably thinking, man, this is becoming a cycle here. It says, lightning came and started a fire, and guess what? All your sheep burned up. And some of your servants were killed as well. Yeah, remember, Job has 7,000 sheep. That's a lot of sheep. I don't know if you realize that. That's like a lot of sheep. And in the ancient world, they don't have money. All your stuff is in sheep, camels, livestock stuff. So this is like him losing, millions and millions of dollars while he's doing this. And so he's thinking, man, this is not a good day. And then it's almost probably crazy for him. Then he's seeing another guy, and he's probably like wanting to run the other direction. Stay away from me till tomorrow. Don't give me any more news. The third guy comes and says, Job, I got some really bad news for you. He's saying, what more could go wrong? And the guy says, the Chaldeans, who were from Babylon, that area over in Mesopotamia, which would be kind of Iraq nowadays, they sent some raiding parties, and they took all your camels and donkeys and all these things. So, and they killed some of your servants, and I'm the only one that's left. So if you remember when the Great Depression, when the stock market crashed, they called it Black Friday. This is Job's own personal Black Friday. He went from being Bill Gates to being like the homeless dude down on the street in about 20 minutes. He's lost everything. He's lost all his sheep, all his camels, all his donkeys, all his livestock, all these things. But then the fourth guy comes, and I think this is the one that hits him the hardest. Because if you've made a lot of money, you can always make a lot more money, but you can't replace what he loses here the fourth time. A fourth messenger comes and he said, Job, I have some really bad news for you. And we saw already that his sons and daughters would gather, and they would have feasts and celebrations in each other's houses. And he said they were at one of these feasts and celebrations that they always have, and a wind came and knocked the building down, and it killed all of your sons and daughters. And so Job's world is just rocked up to this point. He just doesn't know what to do at this point. Look in the following verses here. In verse 20, it says, at this Job got up and tore his robe and shaved his head. Then he fell to the ground and worshipped and said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord taketh away. May the name of the Lord be praised. And in all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. So Job kind of has to deal with this. He's thinking, I just lost everything. In the ancient Near East, what you would do is you would rip your clothes and you would shave your head, and it was a sign of mourning. So it's kind of like when we go to the funeral, you put on your black clothes and you go to the funeral, and that's the time of how you show your mourning. This is how they did it in the ancient Near East. You would shave your head, I don't know what you would do if you were older and you were already bald. I guess you kind of already have half of it there. But he shaves his head. He's going through this. He's kind of mourning. But look at his response. He says, you know what? I didn't have anything when I started. I'm not going to take anything with me. God's given me a lot, and God's taken a lot away from me. But I'm still going to worship God. And so he's still mourning, but he's still worshiping God, still following after God. So look in chapter 2. Satan is not happy at this point. We'll skip some of it down here. God kind of talks to Satan, where you're at. I've been walking around the earth. Have you seen Job? And he says, yeah, I saw Job. And he said, look, you took everything away from him, and guess what? He's still worshiping me. And look at Satan's response. He said, skin for skin. Verse 4, chapter 2, verse 4. Skin for skin. A man will give all he has for his own life, but stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face. The Lord said to Satan, very well then, he is in your hands, but you must spare his life. So Satan says, look, you took all his stuff, you even took his kids, but he's still worshiping you. But I guarantee you, if you make him sick, if you touch him, if he thinks he's gonna die, he's gonna give up. He's gonna give up. Nobody can go through all this and still follow after God. So God says, all right, you can touch him, but you can't kill him. And I think this passage here is a great example. In the New Testament, we read that Satan is the great accuser. And it says that he goes to God and he's always throwing these accusations at us as Christians, and that Christ is our great kind of defense attorney and is defending us. I think it's a great example of how this works. You know, we live a life and Satan is coming to God and saying, look, this guy, yeah, he's good, but if you did this, he would be bad. Or can you believe God that he did this or that? And so this kind of is an illustration of what we see in the New Testament. But Satan goes on the attack again. And look what happens to Job this time. Verse 7. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and afflicted Job with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. Then Job took a piece of broken pottery and scraped himself with it as he sat among the ashes. Now, they have never made a Job movie, as far as I'm aware of, but I can just picture this guy just sitting there. I mean, I've had a couple boils throughout my life. They are not something that you really want to deal with. They hurt, they itch, not. He's got them all over his body. I mean, he's got to be the most pitiful person in the history of the world. Sitting here, he's sitting in ash. He's got a piece of broken pottery. He doesn't have a back, they have those back scratchers and stuff you can buy at like Kroger or something like that. He doesn't have a back scratcher or anything like that. He's got a piece of broken pottery that he's using to scratch himself with. I mean, he just looks pitiful at this point, sitting in ash, and he's probably thinking, what did I do to deserve this? I mean, if anybody in all the Bible had any chance to have a beef with what happened to him, it would have been Job. He could think, God, I've done everything you want me to do, and look what happened to me. I've lost my money. I've lost my family. I've lost all my health. He doesn't know about this conversation between God and Satan. I think if he's sitting here with all these boils, he's probably thinking, I'm on the verge of death. He probably looks awful. He's probably thinking, this is it. I'm going down, and I'm going down in a ball of fire here. And this is bad. But yet, his response will surprise us. He continues to not talk bad about God. In fact, look at his wife's response in verse 9. His wife said to him, are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die. Now, a lot's been said about his wife, that she's this awful, horrible, pagan person because she says this, and yeah, it's not good what he says, but you also have to cut her a little slack here, I think. You gotta remember, she is the mother of the 10 children that have passed away. So she's dealing with a great emotional distress at this point too. I couldn't imagine losing 10 children all in one day. She's already lost that. She's sitting here looking at her husband, And I'm sure it's not a pretty sight seeing her husband sitting here with all these boils and sitting in the ash and scraping himself with pottery. She's thinking, and in that time, if you're a widow, the only way you have money is if your husband has left you money, or if you're old enough or young enough still, you can marry somebody else. But if she's had 10 kids, she's obviously not that young at this point. But all their stuff's gone. But see, Job's already lost all his stuff. So she doesn't even have any sense of financial security. If Job dies, she's thinking, my life is ruined. And so her response is when you put it in that context, is pretty much what the average person would respond to. If you lost all your stuff, you lost your kids, and your husband was about to die, most people would say, God, what's going on? Why should I trust God in this situation? And she doesn't know that it's Satan behind all this. She doesn't have access to that information like we do as we read through the story. So she's just assuming, God must hate my husband because everything has gone wrong. And yet she still sees her husband being faithful to God. And she's like, this doesn't make any sense. Get rid of this, Job. You need to just curse God. God has abandoned you. But look at Job's response here. Verse 9. His wife said to him, are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die. He replied, you are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? In all this, Job did not sin in what he said. So we see Job's response, and it shows a very great spiritual maturity. And Job is saying, look, God gave us all this stuff. We didn't own this stuff. We didn't have this stuff. God is the one that gave us these things to begin with. He's the one that gave us our children. He's the one that gave us our prosperity. He's the one that gave us our health. The only reason we were rich, powerful, and blessed is because of God. So why should we get upset at God when God takes these things away from us as well? And I think that when we come to this, we think, man, Job is like some kind of spiritual giant that he is able to do this. But this is how we as Christians are to respond to this as well. And then to close it out, look at in verse 11. It says, when Job's three friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhamite, and Zophar the Naamathite, heard all the troubles that had come upon him, they set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was. And so we see here that his friends come, and his friends will play a major role in our next section of our series as we go through, as they kind of give the worldly explanations to why this type of thing would happen. But look what his friends say. It says they hardly recognized him. They wept when they saw him. They tore their robes and sprinkled, so they mourn as well. And I think some of their mourning is they think their friend's going as well. I mean, he looks like he's on the verge of death. It says they comforted him, but look what it says. They didn't say a word. And I think this is an interesting. Sometimes when people are going through stuff and bad things have happened, I mean, Job has lost 10 of his children. Sometimes, you may not have the words to say to someone as they're going through things. Sometimes, if you say something, it's just going to sound, really bad. Like if someone loses their dad or their mom or something, and you say, oh yeah, I lost a cat once. That's not going to help in this situation. And so they're just saying, we don't even have the words to say, but we're here for you, Job. We're going to comfort you during this time. And at this point, they are a great benefit to Job, I think, in comforting him. Unfortunately, they give some really, really bad advice, which we'll see next time. But they are there with Job, so he's not alone. He's going through these difficult times. And I think that shows that God gave Job the strength to make it through this, but God also put Job in his life to comfort them when he was going through these difficult circumstances. So what can we learn from Job in this part of the story? We can learn a couple things. The first thing is that we don't always know the big picture. Job didn't know that God and Satan were having this, conversation up, and God was dealing with Satan at this time, that Satan was behind all these attacks. And a lot of times we rush to judgment, kind of like Job's wife, and we say, God's doing all these horrible, awful things to me, and it's not God at all. It's Satan that's behind this whole situation. And so sometimes we blame God for things, and God's ultimately not the one that's responsible. Sometimes we do stupid stuff, and then we say, God has put me in this awful situation. And it's like, you realize that you did all these things, and God has just allowed you to do that, and we blame God. Other times Satan comes in, and we kind of forget that we are part of a spiritual battle, and Satan is out to destroy us. And he doesn't just have one way to do it. He's out to destroy us, and he has many ways in which he does this. And for Job, it was taking everything that he had was the way that he tried to destroy him. For other people, it happened in different ways. But Satan is on the attack. And second, we love when God blesses us, but we hate it when God takes stuff away. We sing the song, and blessed be the name of the Lord, and it's, you give and take away, you give and take away. My heart will choose to say, Lord, blessed be your name. I know I can sing that. I just stopped it because I can't really sing. But that's the song we sing, and I think sometimes in our minds, subconsciously, what we're really singing is, you give and give and give, and you give and give and you give, and you give and give and you give, and when you take something away, we get angry about it. And that's kind of our response to God a lot of times is, as everything's going great, we love God, but immediately, as soon as something bad happens, that we want to turn away from God, or we want to get angry at God, and we kind of turn against God instead of running to God for comfort and for understanding. We just say, I don't want anything to do with you anymore, God, and I'm done with you. And so we see Job here. Job didn't mourn. Job wasn't perfect. We'll see even in the story, Job's not perfect. He begins to kind of question God later on, but his response was, I don't maybe not understand everything. I don't understand why I'm going through this. But his response was, hey, God gave me everything I have. God has the right to take everything away. I'm going to trust God with everything I have and allow Him to control my life. I think we can learn a great principle from that. Let's pray. God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your word, God, and that we learned from Job in our first portion here that bad things are going to happen to us. Even if we do everything right, sometimes bad things happen to us because we do have an enemy in Satan who's out to destroy us. And sometimes we even make mistakes ourselves, and you have to discipline us to show us that we're doing wrong and where we need to change things in our lives. And sometimes we don't like that. Sometimes we want to take the easy way out. We want you to bless us, but we don't like it when you take things away. And it's a challenge for us, God. We just pray as we go through this week, this month, this year, and just through our lives that we would thank you for all that you have given us. We would be good stewards with what you have given us. And that when you do have to take things away, or when Satan comes on the offensive against us, that we would look to you for strength and peace and comfort, and not run away from you in anger and frustration, God. Thank you for that as well. In Jesus' name.